Is the Law Minister now a political liability for the government? Joining us on that discussion, Shantaram Naik, Chairman Parliamentary Standing Committee on Public Personnel Grievances, Law and Justice, also Rajya Sabha MP for the Congress. Nalin Kohli, National Executive Committee member of the BJP. TSR Subramaniam, former Cabinet Secretary to the Government of India. Vikash Singh, former Additional Solicitor General of India, as well as DR Karthikeyan, former Director of the CBI. But Mr. Shantaram Naik, let me begin with you. We've heard what the Solicitor General told NDTV yesterday, the first real comment on the matter coming from the government's own law officer, who said the Law Minister did in fact call that meeting and he erred in doing so. Is it now becoming increasingly untenable for Ashwani Kumar to continue?
I would just say one thing. If the Solicitor General had enlightened the people of the country whether it was immoral on the part of Law Minister to call such a meeting, whether it was wrong on grounds of propriety, or it was totally illegal. Because there are three things which are to be applied. If Solicitor General were supposed to enlighten on this aspect, we would have been glad. Now, you see, even
all right, we seem to be having a problem with that link. We'll try and go back to him. But Nalin Kohli, the news break that we've just had, in a context where already we've heard the Supreme Court, bring all of this up in no uncertain terms. In this context, another meeting now being reported, between the CBI Director and the Attorney General, perhaps even with a PMO official. The CBI Director, of course, declining to comment on those meetings. But I think the question of impropriety coming up over and over again.
I think Mr. Jaitley put it quite eloquently in the Rajya Sabha when he said this government inherited an Indian dream. It has now converted it into a nightmare. And I think if the government had simply focused on the truth, there wouldn't be this kind of a situation, nor would we be sitting and debating all this, nor the Supreme Court would be commenting. The very fact that the government probably wants to hide something, which is evident that we have this scenario. Now, whether the Law Minister has erred or not, it's evident from the fact that the Supreme Court has simply commented not in favorable terms. Secondly there is conflict within, and it's highly regrettable, within the law officers of the government itself. And now, as I just was gathering and your link broke, even the Congress representatives does not seem to be on the same page on what this. So there seems to be confusion all around. If the government would only singly focus on punishing the guilty, unearthing the truth, we wouldn't be in a situation like that. Nor would we be discussing about the biggest scandal in independent India, or the biggest scam, which is this Colgate scam.
Vikas Singh, on the 6th of May, the CBI Director will file that affidavit saying, who asked for changes, what changes were made, were any names, details removed from that final report. Is that going to be then critical?
That will be according to be the most critical, because if you ask me, my very firm view is that the government has every right to look into the affidavit. The government has every right to assist the Supreme Court in giving the correct facts to the Supreme Court. The government, if they behave like a sovereign and they behave like the executive, in the separation of powers, they definitely have a role to play. But if the government itself has something guilt, inside them, and the way the Solicitor General has now come out and the way the government is going to change its stance, it seems that the meeting, they're going to wash their hands of the meeting, then probably, you can't then justify. Ultimately, then what will be determinative would be what changes have been made. If the changes are, if Ashwani Kumar can show is bona fide, that showing that what he did was basically to present the correct facts to the Supreme Court, the complete facts to the Supreme Court, and not distort anything, I think there is nothing wrong. But there is one thing very important. As far as CBI is concerned, the investigation of the CBI is absolutely independent and nobody can interfere in that. But as far as administrative reporting is concerned, I don't see any wrong as far as if the government side, for instance, the Joint Secretary Cole, he could be there to just provide the details of what all has, because unless you have the details correctly placed, you will not ultimately tie up properly the entire case. So you will not be able to, pin the real accused in the matter. So,
but TSR Subramaniam, the longer the Law Minister stays, is it going to be worse for the credibility of this government?
Ankita, I would like to comment on what Mr. Vikas Singh just said now. On your point, I'm not a political commentator. I would, if I were a strategist, not a political commentator, strategist, if the Law Minister goes now, there may be attack may be elsewhere after 8th. So possibly the delay is taking place to ensure that if a sacrifice has to be made, let it be this person after 8th. I'm not talking politically, I'm talking as a strategist. As to what, I'm not a legal luminary like Mr. Vikas Singh. I'm only, I'll read to you in the, which is now the current law, so to speak, interpreted Supreme Court, Justice Verma in the Jain Hawala case, right to supervise administration, etc., etc. The last sentence reads, provided this, nothing should be understood to mean that these powers would extend to permit the minister to interfere with the course of investigation and prosecution in any individual case. Now, this is an individual case being monitored by the Supreme Court, and there is no administrative. It also refers to the administrative supervision. It talks of personnel, quality of personnel. It talks of the number of pendency of cases, etc., etc. While the CBI has the right to consult anybody, including Law Minister, Attorney General, law officers, any private lawyer, anybody, I don't think this particular order of J.S. Verma can be interpreted to mean that the minister can call and look at the report being given, which is a factual report on what they have examined, and even assuming for 1 second that this is, you can stretch the things to say Law Minister can do that. Right. No way that somebody from the PMO, somebody from Coal Ministry. So in my mind, I would like to wait till 8th to give a final view. Right. In my mind, there is no question that the order of the Supreme Court, the J.S. Verma's dictum, has been totally violated. Beyond all that, I think just the tone, tenor, substance of the adverse comments, without going into culpability of any sort, would demand immediately, out of shame, the person in charge to resign. I would expect, because that kind of a strong argument, strong kind of comments from the Supreme Court is. Lastly, do we wait everywhere for a person to be convicted in a court of law, appeals done, and then mercy petition for him to go? We are a democracy. Some fig leaf should be there at some point of time. Some shame should be there. People should say, after all, nobody has a birthright to hold office.